Hi, my name is Jan Wilczek from WolfSound.com. Welcome to WolfTalk, a podcast about audio programming. In this podcast, you will learn how to build your career in programming or research related to audio, meet programmers and researchers from all around the world, and learn about the intricacies of sound. Hi everyone, and welcome to the 16th episode of the WolfTalk podcast. Today I have a very special guest for you. His name is Ian Hobson. He's currently a freelance audio programmer, but he previously worked at Ableton. And I think in the community, he's most well known for his love for Rust applied to audio programming. So we'll of course discuss Rust, but we'll also talk on his background and on his work organization and how we can approach the freelancing space and also self-development space in terms of audio programming. Ian has done great audio developer conference talks, and I think some other talks in different communities as well. And they are all available on YouTube. So if you're interested in Rust applied to audio programming, I highly encourage you to check out those. We personally met at the Audio Developer Conference 2022, and these were the last minutes of the conference, and I just grabbed him and I said, "Hey, is it you?" That's really talking all about Rust in audio programming. And I said, it would be great if we could get in touch and record a podcast together. So I'm deeply thankful to Ian that he agreed on doing this interview. As usual, the episode notes are available at WolfSound.com. And this time you need to append talk 016. So it's WolfSound.com/talk 016. And if you would like to become someone like Ian, someone who is freelance audio programmer, someone who develops audio plugin, I have a resource just for you. It's my free audio plugin developer checklist that you can get at WolfSound.com/checklist. It lists every piece of knowledge that I believe is necessary to become a full-fledged audio programmer. And now, Ian Hobson. Hi, Ian. Thanks for agreeing on this interview. Could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, I'm Ian Hobson, and I'm a software engineer working in Berlin as a consultant, a freelancer, and I've been working with various different companies over the last few years, mainly in the audio realm. And before that, I was working at Ableton, where I was in the sound team for many years and ended up working as the technical principal for DSP and devices being the built-in instruments and audio effects that are packaged with Ableton Live. I guess we can get into what happened before that later in the show. But yes, this is basically where I'm at. And thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Likewise. And exactly, let's go back to the very beginning, because I think almost everyone in this audio programming space starts with an interest in music. So I'd like to ask you, what were your beginnings? Were you playing a musical instrument?
Yeah, for me it was music first before programming. Playing the piano from a young age and being surrounded by music. And although programming also came quite early for me, so I was programming on an old BBC basic computer, this 8-bit thing that was popular in British schools in the 80s. And I was fortunate enough to have access to one of those, and I was writing a lot of basic programs when I was quite young. And then this carried with me. When I went to university, I decided to study music technology. My interest was in electronic music production, sound design, music as an art form. And while I was studying for this course, I found that the programming module was really where I shined, and I had like the most like easy time, like working in Maximus P, making all kinds of weird, like fun musical systems and and visual systems, and using pure data too. So PD and Maximus P were my main programming environments during uni, and then after uni, found that it made sense for me to go into software engineering for my career, and kind of self-taught, got into enough C++ to get work as an engineer, and then built this up over the years. I kind of became established on a software engineering track, but in my free time I was working on audio plugins for me and my friends. We were like playing at club nights and DJing and like wanting interesting audio effects. So I was working on different things basically for me and my mates, and then I kind of got to the point where I wanted that to be my day job and not just my hobby. And so then in 2010 I decided to go back to uni and study for a master's in DSP. I figured like I really wanted to get deeper into audio processing, and really couldn't get my head around it in the small amount of time that I had outside of work. So I figured I needed to take time out for full-time study and just really kind of immerse myself in it for a while. And so I did that, 2010 to 2011. And this was at Queen Mary. I went for a master's in DSP there. And then after that, I decided that I wanted to go back into industry. I decided not to continue at Queen Mary, although it would be a smart thing to do. And friends of mine did that, but like it wasn't for me. And I also at that time kind of felt like a move to Berlin would be a good thing for me. I kind of was in London for a few years, and I was quite attracted to like Berlin as a city. Also the fact that they had major music software companies there, Ableton and Native Instruments in particular at the time, were the ones that I applied to. And I heard back from Ableton, and they gave me a job, and so then I moved over end of 2011. Then spent 8 years at Ableton, and that's how I ended up here. I'm still here.
Can you maybe describe what was your impression with the course at Queen Mary's? Because I'm not sure if I had already someone on the podcast who studied there. So could you maybe briefly describe what was your experience there?
Oh, it was about 10 years into the Center for Digital Music. It's the center there that was founded 2001, I think it was, by some very talented researchers, and they created this environment for people to really study audio processing for the purposes of music. And I was very drawn to that. Like there were DSP courses around that were maybe more for telecommunications or for image processing, but there was this real emphasis on music there, which I really liked and appreciated. And it was great. It was a 1-year master's course that I took, and so I wasn't there for very long, but I learned a huge amount. It was like a fantastic year of just quite intensive learning and being surrounded by very smart people, and thinking lots and lots about DSP and like the future of music and what we could do with all of this stuff. And it was a really great time, but very hard. So my background isn't in maths, so there was a lot of study that I had to do. I remember after my first lecture, just finding myself definitely at a shortfall. So I went straight to the library, and then I was pulling out all the refresher books for all the maths you missed when you didn't study maths as an undergrad. And so it was hard, but really, really rewarding, really fun. I loved it. And something about going back to university, a bit later on, after a few years, at work. Like, you get to go back and enjoy the library and enjoy study and just be surrounded by learning again. Maybe I didn't appreciate it as much the first time around. So like the second time around, I absolutely loved it. It was great.
Yeah, it's amazing that you pushed through, because that's actually, I hear it time and time again that people who study, DSP and come from the music background, they really have a hard time, understanding numerical analysis, algebra, and so on. So it's really awesome that you were able to kind of catch up. Say.
That for me was why I needed the time out to do it, so that I really could spend hours just doing exercises from maths books, like by hand, like really trying to get my head into the basics. Because if you don't do that, then it's always going to be a bit of a mystery. I don't know. I think I heard somewhere that you learn maths best with a pencil and paper. It's I think that's probably true. Like, you just have to really sit there and stare at it for a long time. There aren't too many shortcuts.
Yeah, that's a great tip for everyone listening who is also struggling with maths. So when you then started at Ableton, can you maybe describe what were your duties there? I know you already touched on this, but could you maybe expand on this, and what was your experience developing there?
My role was application developer, so like a software engineer working on the core application of Live at first. So to begin with, I was working in the Live team, working on automation improvements for Live 9 and getting, it's details of Ableton Live, but automation into the session view, into session clips, where this was never possible before, and then also the introduction of like curved automation segments, which was a big user wish for a long time. And then after that, I moved into the sound team, and there we were working on sampling improvements to support push 2. So we needed an improved sampling workflow for like this hardware machine, where it had a very sampling oriented workflow, and then it's using Live as the audio engine, as the music engine, and so there were several upgrades to the sampling features that were needed. Then we worked on a bunch of different things over the years there, and including the wavetable synthesizer that came along a bit later. So I was on the effort to build this flagship synthesizer, which was the first time that Ableton had done that for maybe over 10 years, I think. So that was a really fun project, really quite a deep technical project, as well as a deep product design project. So that was very interesting. I helping the team to build that up over several years to get to the point where we had a product that we were quite proud of at the end. And then in my role as a technical principal, there was a need for oversight of the way that we were working on devices and our DSP to make them portable, so that they could be taken outside of Live. So now you see that in Note, so the app that Ableton have released. So this is using newer Live devices or converted Live devices, so that they can be. So Note isn't using Live as its engine; it's using its own thing, and then, but it is using the same audio processing, so that when you have a set being loaded in Live, then it sounds exactly the same. And figuring out how to achieve that was a big topic back then as well.
Okay, so after some time at Ableton, you decided that you wanted to switch kind of your career path and become a freelancer. What made you make this decision?
It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I think the main thing that I was looking for was just a complete change from what I had been doing. So like I said before, it was 8 years that I did this, like one job, one company, and one kind of way of working, one product line, and I wanted to just kind of branch out a bit, like try a few different things, work for a few different companies, and it seemed like the most efficient way to do that would be to go freelance and get into consulting and work with various people on a like as needed basis, rather than being held onto as an employee. I could just jump in and out and help where I could, and then get out of the way when I was no longer useful. And I've found that really enjoyable. Like I've found it very satisfying to just kind of like turn up and just try and be as useful as I can, and then get out of the way as quickly as possible. Like I find that quite enjoyable. Also, I should mention, around that time, my wife and I were planning to have a kid, so I knew that probably in the near future a baby would be on the way, and for me, having the flexibility to choose my own hours while we were getting into building a family, growing a family, I don't know, starting a family, probably the best word. That seemed really like important to me. Like I kind of didn't, I don't know, like it seemed like if I was going to make a change like this, it would be more feasible pre-baby than post-baby, because once you've had a baby, then it's like, well, I probably shouldn't let go of the security of having a job now, so I figured I should probably get rid of the security before having it, and then I'll try and make it work from there. And that has been good, actually. I mean, it has been great to be able to say, okay, today I'm actually going to work a smaller number of hours, just because the needs of my family are going to take priority. And of course, like, you can make that work, of course, absolutely, with a full-time job, of course. But for me, it just felt better to like get into this position before then. But so it was really those two things, just knowing that I wanted to have a big change, and then also the timing of making that change before getting on with the next phase of my life, I think. And then the pandemic hit. So ready with my home office, just as the pandemic was kicking off. So I was already set up to be working from home anyway, so it all felt quite natural for me.
Okay, but maybe this is a personal question, but you still wanted to stay in Berlin, because I know what's the accommodation situation in Berlin, and you still have not considered and moving maybe outside of Berlin, or I don't know, maybe back to UK.
Not for now. Like we're quite. I mean, it's a nice city to be in. I like Berlin a lot. Less so when it starts getting really grey, like it is now. Like it's a very livable city. The accommodation situation is tough, but if you have an apartment, then it's well, you're less able to move freely. But I don't know. Like it's very difficult for people who are moving to the city. I mean, I've seen this like several times now. People really struggling to find a place, but the good news is that once you have a place, then you're quite secure, which isn't the same in the UK, for example. So if I move back to the UK, I'm renting now, and if I move to the UK, I would feel like I have to buy, and then that puts a lot more pressure on the move. Whereas here, it's much easier to rent and feel safe. For now, with a young family, it works quite well for us to be staying here. Also, my wife was also working at Ableton, and so she wasn't leaving at that point. She has since left, but this came later, and she had a well-established job, and remote working wasn't a thing then. Not really, anyway. Anyway, okay. I'm rambling a bit. Sorry, I'm a bit. Feel free to edit the answers down. I'm not being quite as concise as I would like, but yeah. Basically, I'm quite happy here, and not planning to move anytime soon. But it never say never. I might well end up moving. I mean, to me, the family is the big draw. So we don't have extended family here. So we are taking several trips a year to the UK at the moment, and that draw does get quite strong. but yeah, Brexit and all that. So I'm good at the moment. I'm quite happy where we are.
Yeah, I definitely understand it, and thanks a lot for an honest answer here. And I think now there comes the question that a lot of people in this field ask themselves. So how do you find new clients to collaborate with and put your skills to the best use?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not. There's never like an obvious answer for this. I feel like I've done okay, but I also haven't been trying that hard. To say, like I've been in a fortunate position where I haven't felt too much pressure to find new clients. So I've had word of mouth recommendations. So people have been kind of sent my way. And there have been enough interesting opportunities that have come up to keep me busy over the last few years. Word of mouth is one thing. Also, I've given some conference talks, and then people hit me up off the back of those conference talks, and that's always good because you're presenting something that you know quite well, and then people want to know more. They get in touch with you, and then it's a natural subject to use as the start of a conversation. So that if people are interested in getting into freelancing, conference talks are a great way to establish your presence as knowledgeable on a particular subject. I think if I was wanting to go further with freelancing and maximize my hours and maybe even grow a consultancy, I could start taking on more clients, then any kind of outreach to establish your presence surely is valuable. So I would start a blog or a YouTube channel or a podcast or something. Things that you're
good idea.
Really make people aware of your existence. Otherwise, how are they ever going to find you? I mean, of course, you can find clients, right? But the better situation is if they find you, because the ball is already rolling if they're finding you. They know who you are, they know what you can do, and then you can start a conversation about collaboration immediately. Whereas if you're on the other side of it, looking for clients and you're maybe like cold calling people saying, hey, do you need this kind of service? Then maybe you have to call 100 people or 200 people before you even start a conversation. So yeah, if I was going further with freelancing, then yeah, I would be working harder to make my presence bigger on the internet. I guess I would say. But yeah, so for me, it's a case of being selective about the clients that I work with and ensure that it's always kind of following a particular trend or a particular path. Mm-hmm. So I kind of have a bit of a niche of, audio development is already a niche, high performance audio development. So in C++ or in Rust, which is my main language now, that's a niche inside a niche. So it wouldn't make sense for me to suddenly start becoming like a database consultant or something. That would be a bit of a diversion, but like building a kind of small brand for yourself, or like following a path, and then you start building connections within that path, and you find actually there aren't many people in the world who can do specifically the thing that you're doing, and then that naturally will develop into further opportunities, I think. So,
okay, nice.
Yeah, whatever that niche is, but it's software development's quite a small world, really. Like there aren't that many people who can do this, and if you can find a particular slice of this that's personal to you, then it's quite likely that you'll be able to find work within that space, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's a very solid tip. It's always, I think, this challenge. So specialization versus generalization. But I think it clarifies then along the way. So you see also during work, you see what are the needs, and then it drives your next collaborations and so on. So That's a really, really great tip, and I think that everyone should consider this, and it's on par also with what I heard from other freelancers, that they also try to attend conferences, put themselves out there, and somehow make it visible that they are specialized in this particular area. So before we jump into your technology stack, I have one more question about your contract work, especially if you can answer this, because I've seen that you collaborated with Meta on this haptics technology. So I'm not sure if I understand it correctly. Could you maybe expand on this, how this came about and what does it involve?
Yeah, well, to take a step back from Meta, the starting point for this was a Berlin-based startup called WolfTalk, who were interested in advanced haptics and trying to push the state of the art in haptics forward and bring next generation haptics to a mainstream audience. They really wanted to push the industry forward to caring about advanced haptics. And they, around the time that I left Ableton, were considering switching to using Rust for their core haptics engine, and also they were looking to continue work on their DSP stack, and so they brought me in as a consultant, and I was able to help on the Rust side and also on the DSP side, and help consult with architectural choices in the haptics engine, and also work on some analysis code for them. And it was quite a good client, very, very an exciting startup to be working with, and it was a good time. So founded by an ex-Ableton and some ex-NI people as well. And yeah, like at the start of last year, they ended up being acquired by Meta. So they had built out a plugin for Unity, which made it easy to design haptic effects and then integrate them into games. And this was called Nice Vibrations. And eventually, WolfTalk got acquired by Meta with an eye to improving the haptic design workflow for Meta's hardware. So in the Reality Labs division, they work on like the Oculus headsets, and there they have the same problem that every company basically has with haptics, which is the APIs are underdeveloped, the design tools are underdeveloped, and it's has always been very programmatic. So you type in a bunch of numbers, and that makes the haptic go bzz or bzz, and then there's no real thought going into the design process. So WolfTalk really cared about improving that, and then that caught the eye of Meta, and now they're at Meta working on haptic design tools and like SDKs for integrating better haptics into games, applications, anything that is going to be running on their hardware. So I when they got acquired, I went with them as a consultant for a period of a few months and helped to rewrite their core haptics engine with the knowledge that they had gained from Nice Vibrations to better fit the VR space. And this was like an interesting effort, like all in Rust, which was fairly new at Meta. And now it's shipping, and it's going to be used in a bunch of games, I think, which is quite cool. It's nice. Like it feels like it's actually being used, which is cool. And also nice to be able to work on that kind of like fairly involved real-time engine in Rust. So a nice thing about haptics is that it's very close in terms of technology to audio. So it's a haptic, an actuator, they call it, is like very similar to a speaker. It's basically a magnet that's shaking a weight around rather than pushing air with a coil. It's trying to like shake the device, but it's doing it at a frequency with an amplitude, and over time modulating these properties. And so then you end up with code that looks very much like audio processing code driving these actuators. So building out the haptic engine was very similar to building out an audio engine, just at a lower sampling rate, basically.
Okay, and did you also need to have the device? So with you, was it easier than if you could test it, in real time, so to say?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, nice. You'd have. So, have you seen these VR headsets? It's like
yeah.
On, and then you got things in your hand.
Yeah.
And then you would just have like these things sitting there, like you type the code and then press run, and then see how it buzzes, and yeah, sure, yeah. You needed the. Yeah, so I was surrounded by like VR stuff for a while. So that contract ended June, so I haven't been doing that for a while now, but yeah.
Okay, and any other notable collaborations that you would like to mention or like to share some anecdotes?
So there was a startup in Berlin that I worked with for a while called Pixtunes. They're no longer with us, unfortunately, but that was an interesting experience trying to build out an audio engine for them, again in Rust. It was an adaptive generative soundtrack engine with the idea that it would generate music for everyday situations, like walking down the street or driving in your car or whatever. And they had like grand ambitions to make this like a ubiquitous kind of new music format and this kind of thing. It didn't work out, but technically it was a good project. They had some good engineers on the team, and we were like thinking a lot about how to put together like a fairly flexible, adaptive audio engine in Rust, which was like, we had a good time. It sadly didn't work out, but anyway, another client that is worth mentioning, Super Hi-Fi. They're an American radio technology company who are working on like audio processing tools, audio editing tools, AI tools for radio broadcasters. And they're using Rust as their core language for pretty much everything, I think. And I've been working with them on DSP algorithms like audio cleanup stuff and other things. Again, all in Rust. And what's nice there is that they're making use of open source crates, or like packages in Rust speak. They call them crates. They're able to. We've been able to make contributions back to these open source projects through their needs. So they might find that an open source project kind of goes halfway there, and then we're able to make some contributions, and that gets like upstreamed, hopefully, eventually, so that's been nice as well. Although the Rust ecosystem is like not as mature as the C++ ecosystem, it's growing and getting better all the time, and it's been nice to be able to work on a few things here and there.
Okay, so we're talking Rust, but as I understand, when you started at Ableton, you were writing everything in C++. So my question is, how did you discover Rust, and what made you switch to Rust? Mostly because I understand it's your preferred language now, from C++.
Yeah, it definitely is my preferred language now. It's become quite clear. So when I left Ableton, it was like, it would be nice to write some more Rust in the future. But it's really basically my daily language now, and it's always the exception when I end up writing C or C++ now, which I'm very happy about. Like I feel like it's a positive step for me in my career, and I hope to spend the rest of my days not writing C++. So it feels good at the moment. I mean, maybe something else will come along a few years from now, and I'll be switching again, maybe. But we'll see. If it's Rust for the rest of my working life, that's not so bad. But yeah, I really didn't see much of a future with me and C++. I kind of, how can I put it? I dove into it as far as I could go, and then realized that I had to get out. It was not going to be a viable way forward for me. How can I don't know. Here's the thing. I think it's okay for me to say that because I felt comfortable stepping away from like professional audio development, let's say. So I was doing this for a while at Ableton, and it was my real passion. Like, that's all I wanted to work on. And if that was still the case, then probably I would be, using Juice and C++ like everybody does. And that's because it's a means to an end in the end. It's a tool for achieving a goal, and it makes perfect sense to use the thing that most pragmatically will get you to your goal. And I completely understand that. For me, though, it's I got to the point where I felt like I could have a different goal, and that would be okay. And I would enjoy using different tools to achieve a different goal. So I'm still working in audio related projects, but working on professional like audio plugins right now isn't a goal for me, and so then I don't feel any pressure to stick to using C++. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, or I again might just be rambling here. I'm sorry. What made me switch? Really like knowing that there was a tool that suited me better, and then having the freedom to switch is really the core of it. But specifically, what makes it a better tool for me than C++? It's so there are the well-publicized advantages in terms of memory safety and thread safety. And in the end, these are the core achievements of Rust, that you get those properties in a language that is suitable for systems programming or for low-level audio programming. It is quite unique. Like there isn't another language that's viable as a mainstream development tool, and that may change. But actually, even in the languages that are coming up, like Zig, for example, looks very attractive from an ergonomics point of view. Like, it offers a lot of advantages over C, and there are some parts of the language that have advantages over Rust. But without the core safety features, then you're left with the same fundamental problem that C and C++ have, which is that you have far too many ways to shoot yourself in the foot. And this, I often, or I wouldn't take too seriously in the past, maybe, let's say, it's like, okay, there might be security issues, but you're making an audio plugin, so who cares, right? It is perhaps the attitude that a lot of people might have.
Yeah, I've heard it personally, yeah.
Right, it's maybe something that doesn't affect me. And I think that that is simply, what's it called? Security through obscurity, right? It's like that you're in a niche industry, and so then you don't have to care about this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, but how crashy are audio plugins? Like, they crash all the time. And why are they crashing? Because of memory issues. They're crashing because somebody is dereferencing a null pointer, or a pointer that used to be not null but is now invalid. Or there's a threading issue that's causing the system to go haywire. And these are all issues that Rust forces you to think very carefully about, and it offers you the tools to avoid cases like that from occurring. which isn't to say that you can't write bugs in Rust code. Of course, you can write buggy code in Rust, but they're logic issues rather than that's not the right kinds of bugs. Let's say they're because you've structured your programming correctly, or you haven't thought through the data flow correctly. But you're not getting like, oh crap, you've moved that value out, so that no longer exists in that memory location. So that pointer is now gonna like tear down the application.
I understand. So Rust, as I understand it, Rust gives you kind of good defaults, and you then you need to work harder to make more obscure bugs than the other way around in C++ and C. It's quite easy to fall into a trap.
Yes, and for me, so the good defaults are one thing. So yeah, consts by default and like checked exceptions, and the Rust error handling approach is more akin to something like checked exceptions, and it also offers ergonomic advantages. So you have like nice things like algebraic data types by default. So std variant in C++ is called an enum, and it's a core language feature rather than a library add-on. So then the whole language is built around this concept, and it becomes very natural to start writing all of your code around these enums, which it really like feels great to write code this way. I really miss it when I'm working in a language that doesn't have this. So there's the ergonomic advantages as well as the tooling advantages. The fact that the community is standardized on package managers and linting and formatting and like all this kind of stuff, that every time you start a C++ project, you have like 10 different decisions you have to make about what tools you're going to use for which part, what documentation system you're going to use, what testing system you're going to use. That all just is decided on and there for you from the very beginning. And then there's the day-to-day overhead of dealing with a very complex language. C++ is a much harder language than Rust. Rust is not easy, but C++ is harder. The mental overhead that I always would experience when working with C++ code is quite high, and I feel much more like relaxed and happy writing Rust code. And I don't know, the things, this is like all quite personal, I think, and to taste, right? Like, so it's subjective, and in many, some of these things I'm describing as subjective, like that I feel happier is like obviously very subjective, and somebody else could equally say the same thing about C++. They just hate the friction that the Rust compiler puts in your way, and you just feel freer writing expressive C++ code. Of course, like that's totally true. I just find from my perspective that it's a more comfortable environment to be in when the things that are actually important are treated as important, that you are forced to think carefully about like memory access and thread access, and particularly when you're working in a team. So the fact is you have something like a senior engineer with a very sharp eye reviewing every line of code at compile time rather than at pull request time. Like you're getting this immediate nudge towards good architecture at every step of the way, which can feel quite daunting at first. But then I'd say, like, if you're learning from scratch, then it won't be so daunting. It just becomes natural. Where people often find a lot of friction is if they're coming from C++, then they're used to working in a certain way, and then they're going to like come up against barriers which they have to figure out, like, okay, what's the rusty way of doing this kind of pattern? They might find that actually there's no equivalent, and that you just have to think about your architecture differently. So that can be problematic for people getting into the language. But I still would say that I'm far enough in now that it would be a strong recommendation to learn Rust before learning C++, just to like have an easier time in learning a complex, how to write a complex system, and then transition to C++ if needed. And then you're going to be writing better C++ than most C++ developers if you have a good grounding in good system design that comes with.
That's what I wanted to ask you. So Did learning Rust change the way you write C++ code now?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, back then, for sure, we're still writing C++. Now, I mean, I'm far enough out of it that the way I write C++ is more like writing C, and then it's okay, I'll put a class in here. It's like I'm kind of thinking about it quite differently now. But back then, definitely, and I would say this is true for really any kind of language that's outside of your usual day to day. So it's really important, I think, to get a different perspective on what programming can be, or like the way that like different languages will encourage you to express a solution to a problem. Like particularly if you haven't written in a functional language, it's well worth doing. Like just to try working through a decent sized project in a functional style will get you thinking about like how you approach your C++ solutions. It certainly how to put it with in C++, because you have all power at all times, then you're having to make very careful choices. And I don't know, I think I would be over documenting things that look kind of sketchy to me coming from Rust, where when you need to do something that's kind of foot gunny in Rust, you have to write it in an unsafe block. This is the set of the language where you have the safety mechanisms are for the most part turned off, and then you can do whatever you like with pointers and whatever else. And you try to avoid this, and then if you have to write that kind of code, normally you're doing this within a confined space, and you're building an abstraction around your core piece of unsafe logic. And I think probably I would do the same thing in C++. It would be, okay, this is hairy, so this really deserves the reader's attention, and I'm pull this out. Okay, so this is a class which is supposed to be doing a fairly mundane thing, but actually there's this trickery inside it, and that trickery then deserves maybe more than just a comment that says, oh, this bit of code's quite tricky. It's like maybe it should be factored out and explicitly tested and documented, and I don't know. Maybe I would think about doing that kind of thing.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah. Like just trying to avoid it as much as I can. I don't do it anymore. It's quite nice. Like I there's really nothing that I now at this point where I would think for a greenfield project that C++ would be the right choice. And it's taken a while to get there, I think. So I think my recommendation. So 5 years ago, I spoke at ADC about Rust, and at that point, I was saying that I wouldn't recommend, like if I was starting an audio plugin company tomorrow, the natural recommendation would be just use Juice and C++. And I don't think I would say that now. I think it would be much more, well, personally, I would definitely be using Rust, and then I would make the investment in the frameworks or pushing forward the existing open source projects that are going in the right direction. I would support them and make them a core piece of the stack. And I would feel very comfortable doing that now. But yeah, a few years ago it wasn't quite that clear cut, but now is definitely for me I would recommend it. It's really like if you have a very specific framework that you have to use that is a C++ framework, then sure. But even then, personally, I would create a wrapper around that C++ framework and use Rust. I would wrap it and then use Rust. I think really the only real would be if like your team are established C++ developers and there's no interest in retraining, then that's a very valid pragmatic reason to be using C++. But I personally would be not wanting to work in that team.
Okay, I understand. And since you mentioned wrapping C++ around or to talk to Rust, what is the go-to way now to interop C++ and Rust?
So if you're making use of a C++ or C library from Rust, there's a tool called BindGen, which will take care of generating the stubs, like the FFI stubs, so foreign function interface stubs, for calling out to an external symbol. Like the linker will find it in your C library or your C++ library. And what you then do is you have a crate, which is your FFI layer. So typically it will be called, I don't know, if your library is called foo, then it will be foo sys. So for system, I guess. And then that will just be the generated wrapper code. That's where all the unsafe stuff goes, or most of it, right? Like that's where it's the boundary between Rustland and whatever is on the other side. Then you'll create an ergonomic wrapper on top of that. So you typically in your application code won't be calling that sys crate directly. You'll be doing it through like a friendly layer. And that's kind of an established practice that you'll see throughout the Rust ecosystem. There's tons of C++ and C libraries that are wrapped in that way. Then if you're working on a Rust project and you want to make use of it from another language, then the standard approach would be to, it was to use CBindGen. And CBindGen is doing the opposite job of BindGen. So it's looking at the exported functions that are in your library, which are exposed to the outside world with C ABI linkage. Then it will generate a C header for you, or a C++ header from those Rust symbols. And then from your C++ application, you can call into the Rust code as if it was, I don't know, compiled with. It doesn't matter what language it was compiled in at that point, because you have a publicly declared interface that's just using the C ABI. Where that gets tricky is when you want to start generating bindings for more than one language. So if you want like to call from Python and also C# or Swift or Kotlin or whatever, like there's a bunch of languages that people use to build applications with that you maybe want to call into your core logic that you've implemented in Rust. There it gets a bit fiddly because there isn't one ideal tool for generating everything at once. But there is a new project that Mozilla are working on called Unify. So it's Uni FFI. And they're really trying to solve this problem of multi-language binding generation. And it looks very promising, and they seem to be quite happy about what they're delivering, and it looks good. So the next time I'll be working on a project that needs to make use of Rust from other languages, I'll be looking at Unify for sure. It looks very promising.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine if you'd like to, for example, use Rust on Android and not use C++, then I guess you would need to call Rust from Kotlin or Java or that. No, and for this would be very, very useful.
Yeah. No, that's right, and it works. I've done this, and it works just fine. And actually, it's it works very well. I don't know if there's actually more to say about it than that. It's just the same as if you had written it in any other language.
Cool. I also need to try it out then. And I think a very practical question is also, you touched on this a little bit, but you were already an established programmer in the C++ field. And I'm very curious then, how did you, or maybe if you can give a general tip, so how did you learn Rust from scratch once you were already established? Because you had your day job, and then to learn a new language, it does seem like a bit of an effort.
Yeah, it is an effort, but it's what I'm trying to imagine is, what's the situation where you simply can't learn a new language? Having already learned a language, and and especially if you've learned C++, which is one of the hardest languages to learn, then what would put somebody in the mindset of assuming that they can't learn another language? Okay, so it takes time. And so, of course, if you don't have time, then that's going to be difficult. But if you can carve out some learning time, and most employers will offer something like this, like you can either you have like an agreed day or two or a week every half year or something, like usually you'll get some kind of freedom to just like learn new things. And you take that time, and it's a question of prioritizing it, right? Also in Germany, they offer like occasional educational leave. So you can ask for like a week off every year, I think it is, to go on a course. And you could probably use an online software course. And people maybe don't know that exists. And maybe it exists in your country and you don't know about it. And it's worth looking into, like what's on offer for you as an employee to take time to make sure that your skills stay relevant. That you have, I mean, even if you're not learning a whole new language, and there's always tons of stuff that you have to learn in software development. It's like endless, like the number of things that you learn. And fortunately for me, I really enjoy it. Like I really enjoy learning new things. I'm naturally quite curious. I always want to like learn the new stuff, and so I enjoy that. And that maybe is why also it doesn't seem daunting to me. It's like it's a great opportunity to learn something new. It's really, really good fun, I find. Like it's a luxury, I guess, to have the time to be able to do it, given that there are people who don't have the time. I would just like, if people are stuck in a situation where their employer is grinding them down and they've got no time to learn new skills, then it's something to talk to your employer about, I think. Like it's really important to take time to continue your learning, like throughout your career, like vital, I think. Like, I mean, so you're involved in education. Do you find that this is a challenge for people, that they're unable to find the time to learn new technologies in their careers?
Yes, definitely, because they have a day job, right? And if it's a C++ job, then it's not so bad. But let's say you are a C# developer, right? And you would like to learn more audio programming. So you really need to get into a very different state of mind, either to write C++ or Rust, for that matter, because these are vastly different languages than C#. And then you also need to learn about the signal processing stuff. And in this aspect, the knowledge is quite scattered around the internet. So there is not a single point of reference. And but okay, also developer work is draining mentally. So it's 8 hours of really thinking hard through problems. And put on top of this a situation where you have a family, right? So you have, let's say, a little kid, or maybe 2 kids. And then typically these people, they can, learn only when the kids then went to sleep, because obviously they need to spend time with their children. So this is, I would say, an issue of time and then an issue of energy. And but I also recognize that there are some people who probably, like you, have this really strong drive, to learn new stuff, to discover new stuff, and can, squeeze in this additional time here and there to read something while they're commuting, and maybe have more like open mind to it. So I would say, if you are a naturally curious and open person, then you will naturally find the time and energy to learn. Yeah. But if you don't like it, if you struggle, then it will be really, really hard.
Yeah. So yes, I have a small kid myself, and I can sympathize with people who really struggle to find time in their day, and energy is a huge issue, of course. Like I'm always tired. This is a big challenge for sure. what can I say though? It's like hard things are hard, and learning learning a whole new technology stack and a whole new industry. Like if you're coming from maybe like C# game development or something, and you're like, audio development seems like fun, and like that's something I'd like to get into. It's like, yes, it is fun, and you probably do want to get into it, and you're going to have to like find a way. Like it might mean asking for a sabbatical, like take it, or a retreat, like ask your family, can I just go off to a shack for a couple of weeks? I don't know. Like something has to happen. Like you can't just like accept, I don't know, like you can't just magic knowledge matrix style into your head. Yeah. I don't know, like it's I don't want to sound callous about it, but it's like a certain amount of realism is necessary. It's like you do have to think about like the scale of the task, and how to fit that in. It's like understanding that it will take time, I think, is important. But then if you can figure out like a roadmap for yourself, then get on the right track. Then it's highly rewarding, I think.
Can I then add to this? Because now you have an opportunity to save other people time, and by sharing, what are the best resources in your opinion to learn Rust audio programming, or what are your then tips or your method to learn a new programming language or a new piece of technology?
Okay. So for Rust specifically, there are some really fantastic learning resources for Rust. Just getting into the language and picking some simple projects that have nothing to do with audio, just solve some problems. That you can find lots of coding challenges on the internet, like small tasks, or like do Advent of Code. I really like it's worth looking up if you haven't seen it before. Like lots of really fun challenges. In the old days, I would always go to Project Euler, which is still actually quite useful when you're learning a brand new language. Like just really like get to the nuts and bolts of how do I solve a problem in this language. But there's the Rust book. There's also this interactive learning system. I think it's called Rustlings, I think it's called. And that's just a set of an interactive like command line game, basically, where you solve Rust problems. That's a good tool to try out if you're brand new to Rust. And there are also courses now that have been produced by like large organizations that are upskilling their developers on Rust. So I think it's the Android team published quite an extensive 3-day boot camp they use for their trainings, and they've published the materials, and it looks like a very well structured entry point for learning the language. Then for audio, there's the Rust Audio Discord is quite active. I'm not really on there at all, but there are people on there who are like online and all the time and ready to help. And there's lots of people answering questions there. And there's some fun projects to look at. The NIH plug project is a very promising plugin abstraction layer. So it kind of gives you the abstraction that you need for delivering like a VST plugin or like a whatever else plugin, like all the different formats. And it's one of the big benefits of Juice, right? Like you write your code once and then it deploys everywhere. And NIH plug is a very promising looking project for Rust. And it's worth looking at that, because then there's a bunch of fleshed out audio processing plugins, and they give you everything, right? Like that you need to see how a project like this is structured. Mm-hmm. And then you can see some DSP code, you can see some like framework code, you can see some GUI code, see what it all looks like, and see how the pieces fit together. Are there any other I think that's already quite a lot to get through. Mm-hmm. Those would be like the places I would go first. Like if I was like talking to a team now and it's like, how are we going to get going in Rust? It's really like check out the book and work through some problems. Like take a few days and just sink into it, and then things will become clear. I promise.
These are very solid tips, and I will also put the links to all the resources that you mentioned in the episode notes to this podcast.
Yeah, cool. I could give you some more then for Rust. So there's Fun DSP is worth looking at. That's a very nice where somebody's put together a bunch of like DSP algorithms wrapped in like modules that can be chained together very nicely. So that, like, I gave a talk at ADC a few years ago about like this kind of project, and there's been a few projects like this where you have little processing nodes and you can express in code, this is my processing chain, and then it uses the type system to do fancy things. And FunDSP is like a nice expression of that kind of idea in Rust, and that's worth looking at. There's also the Symphonia crate, which is doing a good job of pulling together lots of readers for different audio formats, all written in Rust, so it's dependency free, or at least, sorry, it's not like it's free of C library dependencies, put it that way. So if you want to get going with an audio project, there's also CPAL, which is like the port audio equivalent, or I don't know what, RT audio or something. It is that equivalent, but for Rust. So CPAL is the cross-platform audio layer, I think it is. And you can very quickly pull together an audio app with those crates, I think.
Nice. And sorry if we're going too deep, but I'm super curious about this. What then, if you were to write a GUI application with Rust, regardless of whether it's for audio or not, then which framework or library would you choose?
Well, it depends. But right now, I've come around to the idea of using the web view as your UI. So there's a great Electron equivalent in Rust called Tauri, like Tauri. And the main difference to Electron is that it uses the OS's native web view that comes bundled with every modern OS. So your generated application bundle size is quite small, like very small. Like Electron apps all have their own like embedded instance of Chromium and everything that goes with it, and that's why they're so like large on disk. Whereas Tauri applications seem very lightweight, and then if you combine that with a JavaScript framework of your choice on the front end, you have like a very like powerful stack. For audio, it's not clear to me that that's ideal yet, but it doesn't seem to be a major use case that they're considering, like high throughput data coming from an audio backend into the UI. But I haven't experimented with this yet. I don't think there's an ideal solution for that yet. Slint is looking very promising. So Slint is a new UI project which is being built by some Qt developers. So Qt QML is a project that they worked on, and now they're building what they think is, or they're promising to be like a more lightweight, modern take on that kind of idea, that you have a nice, simple, reactive scripting language on top of a Rust backend, and they have audio as a focus. So they're working with a professional audio technology company, and they made an announcement recently, and this company is quite happy using Slint for their UIs. So UI is still something that's emerging. I think it's still getting there, but it does seem to be like getting somewhere. One of the big issues with UI in Rust is that Rust it isn't very friendly to typical OO object-oriented patterns, and like a lot of the major UI frameworks benefit quite strongly from like using inheritance and objects, and there have been a number of experiments over the years to try and figure out like what's the ideal way of writing UI code in Rust. And what seems to be like becoming quite popular it is the like immediate mode declarative approach for UIs, where you just say, this is the shape of the UI, and then you have like some hooks to say like, okay, if I click on the button, then this event should happen, but that event goes back to the data model. Then you update your data model, and then the UI gets rebuilt. And that approach fits quite well with Rust, where like there's a very specific data flow. And this is actually a type of application architecture that I quite like. It goes back to Elm, and then Elm influenced like Redux, and then this has influenced a bunch of other frameworks. And in Rust, you now have crates like Iced is one. It is quite popular. There's eGUI is like quite a nice immediate mode UI framework. And Visia is one that's being worked on at the moment, which again looks very promising. And they all seem to have a good idea of how UIs should look, but they're still under development. So like the widgets are still like, maybe they're missing some widgets that you might need, but at least they're making good progress. So then NIH Plug, this plugin framework that I mentioned earlier, has kind of a UI agnostic approach to its architecture. So you can choose your UI framework to embed in your plugin. And so then if you prefer using Iced or eGUI or some other UI framework, then you have your plugin abstraction layer and then your UI of choice that you combine together to make your plugin. And I quite like that. It's quite nice. But I'm not sure that I'm fully sold on immediate mode UIs for audio development. But I think that there could still be somebody who figures this out and makes it optimal. Because actually, if you do have a very reactive UI, like you have a lot of like modulated parameters and audio meters and things, there is a lot of animation going on anyway. So actually, like refreshing your UI 60 times a second maybe isn't so bad anyway. Like it's something that maybe people are overcautious about, I think. But I'm getting off track here, and this isn't something I've investigated properly recently. I should stop talking about it. I think that there's maybe potential for thinking a bit differently about UI here, and it's still being figured out.
Okay, nice. But many thanks for your detailed answer, because that's one of the topics that's always interests me, and I think this NIH plug framework is something worth looking at. And still regarding a little bit Rust related area, I think you're also known quite well for inventing your own language, Koto.
Well, I don't know about known. It's something that I haven't really like publicized it properly or anything. It's still very like in the kind of hobby project stage where it's basically just for me, but I've open sourced it and it's online. So if people want to take a look at it, they're very welcome to. It's still at the stage where it's kind of, there's going to be lots of changes while I'm still figuring out what it should actually be. But we're getting to the point now where it seems fairly stable. At least I haven't planned any major changes recently. So stable means that I haven't changed it. So, but yeah, it started off as a project that I took on because I wanted a large-ish project to get my teeth into. When I was like post Ableton, knowing that I wanted to do more with Rust, and my feeling was that I just needed something like fairly sizable. And also at that time, I had come to the conclusion that for rapid iteration of like feature logic, working in a systems language isn't ideal for me. I got interested in the idea of maybe like hot loading your code. Like you could do everything in Rust, but you just like find chunks of the application that can be hot loaded so you get rapid iteration through that, rather than having to wait for the whole application to rebuild and yada yada. And I figured that I missed having like a Lua-like counterpart to C++. So you can build out a let's say, like a game engine where you have your core engine written in C++, and then you have Lua as your scripting language. Or in Ableton Live, C++ is the core engine language, but then you have a scripting layer exposed in Python. So you can do a bunch of like controller type stuff in Python. And I was kind of missing that for Rust. There are bindings for Python, Lua, and other languages in Rust, but I kind of saw an opportunity for myself to kind of think, what do I actually want from a scripting language? And it seemed like a fun project to get into. Like I would learn a bunch, and yeah, it was good. It was good fun. So it's basically like a sabbatical project that turned into a pandemic project. So like between like client hours, I would always have a thing to go back to work on. I would never be stuck for something to dig into. So it served that purpose for quite a long time. And now, what are we? We're like three years into it, and yeah, I had a kid along the way. So then it became a back burner project. But yeah, no, it works and it's there. What I need to do now is just kind of put the final layer of polish on it so that I can recommend to other people to check it out, because so far I've been saying just don't use it, and that needs to change. I need to be able to say that it's actually worth looking at. It's really just for, the purpose of it is for working in a more creative context. So if you're working on like an animation or a level for a game or something, then personally I don't need a full-blown graphical editor for this, but I also find that like the complexity of a systems language gets in the way of working creatively. So it for me was just an exercise in trying to find a minimal scripting language that would suit me when I'm in a more creative mindset than rather than like an engineering mindset. So it won't be to taste for a lot of people. A lot of people will look at it and think, I don't want to touch that, and that's fine. That's okay. It's more for, the other languages are available.
And have you used this language professionally already?
No, not in code that's shipped, right? So I've used it for scripting in my day job. Yeah, it's a tool that I reach for when I need scripting, sure. Cool. But it's not something that's actually running any production code. Quite rightly.
Yeah, but it's really cool that you were able to kind of build up your own language that aids you in development. And
yeah, no, it's nice. Like I mean, it's more work than I would recommend anyone take on, but because it's not like, oh yeah, you can just write your own language, then you're fine. It's not. I think a more sane approach, maybe if that is your only purpose, is to write a transpiler for an existing language, right? So leverage the JavaScript virtual machine, or do a transpiler for Lua or something. Because that's much more achievable, and then you have a whole working tool chain like that you can build on top of. But I had a slightly different purpose, which was to also learn as I went and just have something substantial to work on, which was its own goal, right? So, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I'm very, very happy that I have it. But yeah, it's been a ton of work.
Nice, and that nicely segues us to the next question, because after watching a lot of your talks and also seeing your output in various places, to me you seem to be like a very structured and organized developer. And I was curious to ask, how do you set up your workflow and how do you maintain these high energy levels?
Yeah, okay. So I'm definitely driven. I care a lot about coding, building things. Like making a thing and seeing the result at the end drives me like a lot. And structured and organized to a degree. There is a lot of chaos in my approach, certainly, but lots of notes is my big tip at the moment. So I spent a long time trying out different note-taking systems and productivity systems and different ways of organizing all of your thoughts and everything. And what I've come back to in the last year is just a big folder full of Markdown files, and that's now everything for me, and it works very well. Like compared to, so I was all in on Notion for a while, and I got really into it, but it compared to the speed that I have with just like, because I've got my editor set up so I can quickly open like daily notes or my to-do list or different notes for different projects or whatever, like it's all just a file in a folder, so you do quick open and then you've got it, and if you want to search for something, you've got grep over your folder of text files, and it's extremely fast. Whereas with Notion, you've got like to wait for their search backend to respond, and maybe it doesn't. And so I got I came back to the idea of just keeping things very simple and lightweight and local, and then it works, and then it's reliable. And if people are interested in that, they should check out Obsidian. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's like
but it's Mac only, right? It's only on Mac.
Really? Oh, okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, but so what I'd say is that you don't need Obsidian. You just need a folder full of Markdown files, and then you're happy. You need an editor that knows how to open them quickly. You need to be comfortable working with text files, but as a programmer, typically you are. And then it's just so easy and simple. You just save everything in like a Dropbox folder or a sync folder, like some cloud folder, and you're good to go. And that's stuck really well for me in a way that no other system has. But yeah, like lots of notes, get everything out of your head, write everything down. Like if your head's feeling cluttered, then write everything down, right? Like it's the classic tip, and it works for me. Like just do a massive brain dump, get it all out. Because I can get quite overwhelmed with, like, just because I'm drawn to new things, and there is an infinity of new things, and it can be a lot. So I do have to put limits on it and make sure I have a structured to-do list, and like everything gets written down. So like a few months later, maybe I'm interested in a topic again, I can go back to it, and But yeah. To summarize, keep it simple. make sure you can actually work with everything that you're noting down, and you can go back to it and find it.
Yeah, I'm also writing this down. Maybe for myself, maybe for someone else. But sorry, following your tip already.
Yeah, good. And then on the other side, like, yeah, I don't know if there's anything more to it. It's like every day I get to my desk, and either I have something to do for a client, or there's a long list of things that I would like to work on for myself, and there's always something to do, always something to learn, and I really enjoy it, and I think that's the main thing that keeps me going. Like, I find it worthwhile, rewarding, enjoyable. And if I didn't, I would find something else to do.
Nice. That's really, I think, a beautiful place to be. And when you are working, what is then your go-to tech stack, if you could describe it? So maybe to simplify this, I know that you're using Rust and you're preferring Rust. What are other maybe tools for programming that you're using, an IDE, etc.?
Yeah, I'm using NeoVim, which is this fork of Vim that uses Lua as its core configuration and scripting language rather than VimScript, and that's got some nice momentum behind it. And then I've built out the IDE features that I need through plugins in NeoVim. So. What are the important things? So, LSP integration is working very well. So and it works very well with Rust Analyzer, which is the main LSP provider for LSP server for Rust. Then you use Vim for debugging and for pretty much everything now. So I was using Visual Studio Code for debugging for a while, but then that was the only thing I used it for. So then I figured, if I just use a debugger in NeoVim, then I won't ever need Visual Studio Code. So yeah, it's really Vim gives me everything I need now. and I'm very command line based, so like it feels very natural for me to just like quickly open an editor in the command line, and like everything just goes in there. And also, if you are interested in getting deeper into like shell based development, then like get a shell manager, and like I use Tmux and to like quickly split different shells open, and then you can put like a command runner over here in this window and like run your unit tests in that window, and then you got your code editor here, and then you can quickly like expand out that window so that all the distraction goes away, or then you can bring the distraction back when you actually need it. And I find this like much more streamlined than using a full-blown graphical IDE, because for me there's just too much going on the screen. Like I get really distracted by all the flashy lights and the pieces of text that are like being updated everywhere all the time. Like I find it really annoying. So yeah, like minimizing is quite a big deal for me. But that means spending time on your own editor configuration, which like is not to everybody's taste, and some people would rather like, I don't know.
It's another rabbit hole, right? That you can get stuck into.
You can do, yeah. But there are also ready-made configurations, right? So you get like there are communities that build out like, here's an IDE ready to go, just do it our way. But then you're doing it their way. I don't know, like it is a rabbit hole. I do find it important. I know that a lot of people hate it and would rather do anything else than configure their editor. But to me, it's like the thing that I stare at for several hours a day. And it's like, why would I not want to have some agency over this? It's like it's your core interface to everything that you do. And then like not learning it properly, not having full control. If you feel like it's getting in your way, then it's like odd to me to not want to do something about that. And so I don't know, like I actually find it quite important for my work to really care about my editor, which sounds weird when I say it out loud, but it is true nonetheless. It's like if you're a trucker, right, and you're sitting in your cab all day, you're going to care about having a good truck cab, and you're going to make it nice because you're in it hours and hours a day. It's really important.
Exactly. And if you're gonna to cut a tree, right, cut down a tree, then the first thing you need to do is you're gonna sharpen your saw. So because with a dull saw, then it will take you hours of effort and frustration.
Of course, yeah. And you're going to go down a rabbit hole of like, who are the best saw manufacturers, and like, oh, I know this guy, like he makes his own custom saws, and it's like, oh, what alloys go into that? Like, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and now a fun question that I'm always curious about when it comes to audio programmers. Then, do you listen to music while programming?
Yeah, I do. Do you?
It depends. I try not to, like in the morning when I really would like to focus. But that in the afternoon when I'm more tired, the music kind of wakes me up.
Uh-huh. And you find it distracting in the morning? Like when you want to focus, it takes your focus?
It drains my mental energy in that sense. So I sometimes do it, but I know it comes at a cost, that my brain needs to fight this distraction that's coming from the speakers.
Right. Yeah, I have that too with like vocal music. So if there are any vocals, then I'm completely distracted. Like my ear is totally drawn to a voice. But so it's certain kinds of music I'll have on. And I find it can help with flow for me to have music that's like, I don't know, I haven't thought of it as draining my mental energy before. I've certainly thought about it being a distraction, but not a drain. But I'm going to think about that. Like, I should just try a day without music and just see if, like, at the end of the day, I'm less tired or something. It might actually be a thing. I don't know. Like, so, but there's a lot of good, like, flowy, kind of backgroundy kind of music that I'll put on. And techno is good for this. Or certain kinds of techno. Like, if I really want to go, then I'll put on like the Surgeon. It has quite a good taste in techno. The DJ is like, he's worth checking out if you haven't heard him. That's good music to work to. There's this guy called Alexi Perela who seems to put out an album a week of like plinky plonky electronic music, which all uses this set of frequencies that they've come up with. I think it's the Kulundi scale or something. I might have that wrong. And it's like the sequence, and they're only allowed to use those frequencies. And they think they have properties derived from nature or something. It's a bit bonkers, but the music is very good to work to, and like there's an endless stream of it. I think he like does a jam every day, and like at the end of the week he's putting out an album. It's anyway, it comes up a lot in my Spotify, and it's good to work to. It's like like somehow the frequencies are working well for my brain. I don't know.
Nice. And speaking of other things that work good for the brain, are you going to attend Audio Developer Conference 2023?
No, so I went last year, and for the first time since 2018, and I really enjoyed it. But for me, I'm in Berlin, and then heading over to London. It's a few days out from family life that is something I probably can't really justify every year. Plus, it's not cheap. It's like London's a very expensive city, so if I'm not doing a talk, then it becomes harder to justify. So hopefully I would start a campaign now for ADC to come to Berlin, and then I'll definitely go. But also, like, I don't know. I think maybe it's like every couple of years for me. Like I can't quite do it this year. Are you going to go?
I'm going to go, and also I'm having a talk myself. So yeah, I hope it will be delivered safely. And if you have a chance, then I also invite you to listen to it and but please don't poke fun then.
No, I really enjoyed your talk from last year. Like I found it really helpful. So like deep learning isn't something I've dug into yet properly. Well, a little bit, but not really in anger. So I found your talk very inspiring. Like I should really give it a go.
It's a really deep rabbit hole, and knowing your curiosity, then I can guarantee that you'll have quite a bit of time spent there.
Exactly. Like I think that's why I've held off. It's like that's all I'll be doing for a while, and I've got other things on my plate at the moment. It's actually though this year I saw there's a whole workshop on Rust audio this year, I think, and then I think there's another talk as well. So it seems like there's a good amount of Rusty stuff this year, which is nice. But yeah, it's a shame to not be there to say hello to these people. But I'm sure we'll cross paths at some point.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to attend those actually, and one of them is held by Chase Kanipe. I don't know if you know him, but I really enjoyed his talk from last year, so I'm sure it's going to be great.
Nice.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Thank you so much for this interview, for sharing all your knowledge and experience. It's been incredibly helpful and inspiring to me, and I'm sure to all the listeners as well. The last question to you is then, if someone wanted to contact you, where do you recommend they go?
So I've got a website at hobson.dev, and then all it is at the moment is just links to other places, but that's where you can find wherever I am. I used to recommend people go to Twitter, but like I'm hardly checking it now. It's gone a bit mad. So at the moment, email might be the best bet, but hobson.dev is me. Happy to talk to anyone who wants to chat about this kind of stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the... Yeah.
Sorry, I just talked up. Sorry. No, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate the work that you're doing to help people get into audio programming. I think that this is something I wish when I was starting out there was more of, and if I was starting out now, I'd be very grateful for the work that you're doing. I really find it a very good thing, and happy to be on.
Thank you so much, and it means a lot coming from you. Then I wish you all the best for your future, and I hope we'll get a chance to meet someday live this time.
Yeah, see you around. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. That was Ian Hobson, a freelance audio programmer who's in love with Rust. Thanks, Ian, for this interview. I highly appreciate your input. If you, dear listener, would like to check out the episode notes at thewolfsound.com/talk016, there I listed all people, places, and references that we mentioned during this podcast episode. If you'd like to support the podcast, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube. And you can also consider giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget about your free audio plugin developer checklist at thewolfsound.com/checklist if you want to become an audio programmer. And I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening and see you in the next one. Take care.